So an example on League in terms of character comparisons that actually ended up, I would argue, being somewhat bad for the game long term is Lucian's E. So Lucian's E, for those of you who don't know, is a dash. And you're probably like, August, why would Lucian's E be bad for the game? So I'd say in Modern League, it isn't. In Modern League, Lucian's E is totally fine. Great spell, 10 out of 10. Very fun, works on the character, Lucian works. Lucian's a great character. All awesome. But here's an important thing. When Lucian came out, his E, in terms of dash speed, was significantly faster than everybody else in the game. Everybody else in the game had a significantly slower dash than Lucian. And this ended up being bad for the game because Lucian's E ended up causing us to have to, over time, power creep the game in terms of dash speed. The reason that is because it was so fast and so much better than all the other dashes that if once you played Lucian, all the other characters felt terrible. You would play Lucian and you'd be like, why would I play anybody else with those lame, bad, slow dashes when I could play Lucian who actually has a good dash that's fast? And so gradually over time, you saw dash speeds increasing on releases. And I think one of the big contributing factors of this was the fact that we had a very popular, very strong character in the meta for a very long time who basically started like setting the expectation for what a dash felt like. Valorant somewhat deals with this, a character like this, in terms of Jett. Jett is incredibly popular, incredibly fun. I would argue she's one of the coolest designs in the game. Like, Jett is amazing. But one of the things that Valorant probably deals with is the fact because she's so popular and so fun and so present and so powerful is it's kind of a question of like every new character needs to consider how they compete with Jett, just like in League, every new dash needed to consider how it felt compared to Lucian. And that can be good or bad depending on like what the power level of the game you want to set at, right? It's a complex thing. It's a complex complex interaction. And so yeah, basically mobility in League probably had ended up being crept up a bit in the long term because of how fast Lucian's dash was. And so that's a thing where it's like, hey, you can make a character who competes with the other characters by being better than them in a certain way. And that might be good. It might not be. But if that character especially becomes meta-defining, then a lot of people will start like pegging that character as the default. They'll be like, well, how do you compete against Lucian? And then it's like, well, if the character feels better than everybody else, that can be pretty rough. Yeah. But anyways, like reinforcing Lucian nowadays is totally fine. He's awesome. But it's like, that was definitely a thing that back in the day, probably long-term caused its dash speeds to go up. Dash is nothing compared to 500 to 600 base MS champs in Season 14. Does Season 14 have 500 to 600 base MS champs? I was under the impression that base MS in League of Legends was like 325 to 350. Yeah. But the ability is called Relentless. He needs to cleanse slows. It's true. Lucian's dash originally on release cleansed slows. The reason it cleansed slows on release is that it was actually just too boring. Like Lucian's E when it was in development was called Boring Dash. I'm not kidding. That was the name of the spell, was Boring Dash. And it was named that because that's what it was. It was just a dash. And so as we got near the end of development, we were like, well, this is just a dash. It probably needs a little more consideration than that, and so we added the slow cleanse. I think the rework got us to the place where like it was really good though, where we like, you know, the dash like resetting with the passive procs. I think that's like the coolest version of that dash. It's pretty good. Yeah. Ghost is OP. Ghost is definitely strong on some champions. Agree with that. Why did VEL'KOZ get the change to being faster in close range, but Nami Bubble is getting fixed? You're legit a pig. Oh, well, I guess I shouldn't have read that last one. We'll ban this guy. Bro is not smart. Imagine coming in and saying, like, it's unfair about Nami. Sorry, VEL'KOZ being better is unfair to Nami. That one's wild to me. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't fix Nami if there's any problems, right? But, like, I don't think VEL'KOZ and Nami are on the same, like, plane of existence when it comes to, like, fairness, if that makes sense. VEL'KOZ is a very fair dude. But yeah, I'm gonna answer that question even though it was asked in completely bad faith. So why are two spells different? Why is VEL'KOZ E different than NAMI Bubble? One of the big reasons is the characters have different needs. As an example, NAMI has a targeted slow, and NAMI has an ultimate that knocks people up, and NAMI can targeted heal herself, and she's a support, right? Those are things that make it so that if someone jumps on NAMI, it is often not nearly as terrible for her as someone jumping on VEL'KOZ. And so the reason we updated VEL'KOZ's E to be better in melee range is because it felt like VEL'KOZ had not kept up with basically the state of League of Legends where people get to jump on you and beat you up. He felt far too fair. Whereas if I look at NAMI, I'm not going to say she's perfectly tuned. I don't have enough context on that. But I guarantee you she is less fair than VEL'KOZ was feeling. And so, yes, basically we kind of determined, hey, where does VEL'KOZ really suffer against a lot of these melee matchups? That's fine for the most part. It's supposed to be a VEL'KOZ counter if you're a melee matchup that can jump on him, but he probably could use a little bit better protection in melee range. Doesn't have to be guaranteed, doesn't have to be perfect, but it probably feels fine for him to have a bit more protection there, which is why we made the change. If something is much better than everything else, is nerfing the specific thing in consideration with balancing, such as slowing Lucian's dash? The answer is yes, Cliffy. So if we go back to the Valorant example, Valorant has done a lot of nerfs to Jett and Raze over time. And the reason they do that is because they're like, Jett and Raze are like the meta-defining characters. Everybody else has to compete with them. So when that's true, you either need to buff everybody to compete with Jett and Raze, or you just need to nerf down Jett and Raze. Same thing happens in League of Legends. Sometimes if Kai'Sa's 50% pick rate, you either need to buff all the AD carries to compete with her, or you just nerf Kai'Sa, right? That's what we're doing with Jinx right now. Jinx is really, really popular, and it's like, she's pretty meta-defining, probably needs a nerf, so we're bringing down the top end. So if something is much better than everything else, nerfing it to bring down the top end can be very good for the game. Now, that second part of this question is, what about slowing Lucian's dash? Now, there is one hard part about this, and that is, if something is better than everything else in a feel-impacting way, it can be really dangerous to bring that down. So, as an example, when we shipped SYLAS, every single spell auto-attack reset on him. That felt amazing. Auto-attack resets in League of Legends feel really, really, really good. But it also made him really broken and really unbalanceable in pro play, because he could just jump on you and unload 5 attacks in, like, instantly. So we could just bring that down by removing the auto-attack resets, and we eventually did that. But the problem, though, is that is a feels-impacting change. SYLAS will feel noticeably worse, and this is what happened when we did this. Like, a lot of players are like, you made SYLAS feel way worse to play, because they were right. He did feel worse to play compared to when every single spell made his autos as smooth as butter, right? That legit feels worse. But it was needed to, like, bring him in line with the game. And so in regards to Lucian Dash, yeah, we could slow it down, but that's going to feel really, really bad. Changing things like cast times and dash speeds and things like that really screw with player muscle memory in a bad way. And so as a designer, there's certain mechanics that you only want to change if absolutely necessary. And as a designer, it is very dangerous to ship those mechanics if you think they'll need to be changed in the future, because, you know, it'll feel really bad when you do it. It's like, as an example with this, Zeri players, you know, for probably the next 5 years are going to be flaming me for deleting her passive, right? It's reasonable to flame me for that because she had a cool passive. It was too much. I had to get rid of it. I needed to do that. I think it was a good change. But removing something like that is a lot worse feeling than giving a character minus 3 AD, right? Changing something's feel, removing something players care about feels a lot worse than nerfing by 4 AD or something like that. So it's kind of a thing where it's like, hey, if some character's broken, you could bring their thing in line, but it's a big risk in terms of feel. So it's not always the right decision. One of the things that I considered doing way back in the day is when KINDRED came out, KINDRED was one of the best junglers in League of Legends. She was the best jungler in League of Legends because she had the same armor as Lucian, but she was ranged. So if you were good at KINDRED, you just walked into the enemy jungle, face tanked them, killed them, and Lamau, destroyed. So one of the things I initially suggested doing to nerf KINDRED back then was remove her dash's ability to go over walls. Because that actually is a big deal for a jungler. If junglers can't go over walls, Like, it just completely changes their ability to, like, invade, run away from invades, be versatile, fight for certain things. Going over walls is a big deal for a jungler. So one of my original suggestions for nerfing Kindred was remove her ability to go over walls with the Q. That would probably have effectively nerfed her, but it also would have felt terrible. Kindred players would have hated that. They would have been like, why you make my character miserable, right? And so what we ended up doing was nerfing her armor by like 8. Because again, she had like melee champion base armor. It made it so none of the melee champions in the jungle would fight her. But like, looking back, I'm glad with how that ended up. It's like, I think it's a lot better to like make her squishy, which is what that did, you know, nerfed it by 8, than make her not have that fun thing that players were used to and like enjoyed about the character. So yeah. The way you say Lamau is so cute. Thank you, proud dog. At least someone's calling me cute.